Let's go ahead, children. This part of lesson deals with the disease Stephen Hawking suffered with, that is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. At the age of 21, Stephen Hawking was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The short form is ALS, and the other name of the disease is Lou Gehrig's disease. So, at a very young age, he was diagnosed with this disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Now, how to make ourselves understand what is this disease and what happens in it? In a very simple sense, the nerves that controlled his muscles were shutting down. So the nerves which controlled the movement of his muscles, they were not working. They had ceased to function. At the time, doctors gave him 2.5 years to live. So doctors had already told him that he does not have more than 2.5 years to live. Hawking first began to notice problems with his physical health while he was at Oxford. On occasions, he would trip and fall or slur his speech. He didn't look into the problem until 1963 during his first year at Cambridge. So when he was at Oxford, at that time only he had realized that he has some physical problem. His physical health was not proper because at times he used to trip, he used to lose his balance and he used to fall, trip. And even his speech was not very clear. There was a slur in his speech. His words were not very clear. And but he did not give a lot of importance to the problem. It was in 1963 when he went to Cambridge that he looked into the problem seriously. For the most part, Hawking had kept these symptoms to himself, and he did not reveal these symptoms to any one of his family members. He had just kept it to himself. But when his father took notice of the condition, he took Hawking to see a doctor. But when his father realized that something was wrong with his son, Stephen Hawking, he took him to a doctor. For the next 2 weeks, the 21-year-old college student made his home at a medical clinic where he underwent a series of tests. Now, the physical problem which he was facing, it was not a very simple problem, and therefore he had to spend nearly 2 weeks at the clinic. He had to stay over there for a series of tests in order to find out that what disease he was suffering from. Now we have a question there that when did Hawking first notice his health problems? So we can just write down Hawking first noticed his health problems when he was at Oxford, because on occasions he would just trip and fall, and at times he also experienced slur in his speech. So this is the answer to this question. They took a muscle sample from my arm, stuck electrodes into me, and injected some radio-opaque fluid into my spine, and watched it going up and down with x-rays as they tilted the bed, he once said. So once when he was interacting with a gathering, or when he was addressing a gathering, he just had expressed that what kind of tests he had to undergo at the clinic. And he just tells them that all these things were done in order to find out, all these tests were done in order to find out that what was he suffering from. And he further adds, after all that, they didn't tell me what I had. Now, it's a very natural instinct of a patient that when such a lot of tests are done, the patient wants to know that what is wrong with him. But Stephen Hawking tells that the people who were testing, they did not tell him that what he was suffering from, except that it was not multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis means abnormal hardening of body tissue. So they just told Stephen Hawking that you're not suffering from multiple sclerosis, and that I was an atypical case. Atypical means a very unusual case. So, in a way, the doctors had told Stephen Hawking that he was suffering with a very unusual type of a disease. Eventually, however, doctors did diagnose Hawking with early stages of ALS. So, diagnose means to detect a medical condition. So, doctors had already detected that Stephen Hawking was suffering from early stages of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, that is ALS. It was devastating news for him and his family. Devastating means causing a severe shock. It was very shocking news for Stephen Hawking and his entire family. But a few events prevented him from becoming completely despondent. But there were a few incidents which took place in the life of Stephen Hawking. And these events gave him courage. It prevented him from becoming despondent. Despondent means dejected, sad, unhappy, and gave him strength to this bear this shock which he had got. The first of these came while Hawking was still in the hospital. There he shared a room with a boy suffering from leukemia. So the first event which took place in Hawking's life was when he was in hospital and he was sharing a room with a boy who was suffering from leukemia. The other name of leukemia is blood cancer. Relative to what his roommate was going through, Hawking later reflected his situation seemed more tolerable. Now, relative to means he compared his situation uh, to the situation of his roommate, the boy who was suffering from leukemia. And then Stephen Hawking reflected, he realized that his situation seemed to be better. It seemed to be more tolerable, bearable. Not long after he was released from the hospital, Hawking had a dream that he was going to be executed. The second event which took place in Hawking's life when he was released from hospital and he got a dream. In the dream, he saw that he was being executed. He was going to be put to death. He said this dream made him realize that there were still things to do with his life. This dream made him realize that he had very limited time and he wanted to do a lot in his life. And therefore, he realized that as he wanted to do a lot of things in his life, he should, and the time is limited, he should do something in this regard. In a sense, Hawking's disease helped him become the noted scientist he is today. So it is believed that the disease, ALS, helped Stephen Hawking to become a noted scientist. Stephen Hawking started taking things seriously and his research seriously after he was diagnosed with this disease. Before the diagnosis, Hawking hadn't always focused on his studies. He was not a focused person. He did not pay attention to his studies. Before my condition was diagnosed, I had been very bored with life, he said, and he found his life very boring when before he was diagnosed with this disease. He said there had not seemed to be anything worth doing, and he did not feel anything important that he should work on that particular thing. He didn't like to do anything. With the sudden realization that he might not even live long enough to earn his PhD, Hawking poured himself into his work and research. But when he was diagnosed with this disease and he suddenly realized that even that much time he does not have, that he could complete his PhD, and his time is so limited that he poured himself into his work and research. He just put in a lot of efforts towards his work as well as research. Now, children, let's go to the next video and let's understand the remaining part of the lesson.